This is brand new material that is a continuation of last year's session. So last year we did Success Secrets of the Superachievers, session 1, and this is session 2. You are going to get new material today which will apply regardless of whether you attended last year or not. So where do we start? When we talk about the most successful people in society and then the rest, whether you want to say that's 80-20, the 90%, 97%, whatever ratio you want to use, there are some people who are super successful, and then there are the rest. What's the difference? What separates people who are super successful from those who are not? Well, in the next hour, I will share with you some ideas from my perspective as to why that's true. From my years of experience as a coach, working with people on their performance, and for my years of studying, reading, watching, listening, to distill secrets of success from superachievers. So one thing that I can tell you is that it always starts right here. It starts right here, which we'll call the mind. It all starts in the mind. All success, regardless of whether you're for-profit, non-profit, in an intellectual profession, in a physical profession, entertainment industry, doesn't matter, success starts here. And so we're going to start here with our material today. So the first secret that I want to share with you, which may seem a little counterintuitive, and some of today's material is counterintuitive, is that on the road to super success, it's totally okay to be completely afraid. Be completely afraid. That is all right. And the reason it's all right is because we can't really get to a high level of achievement without being afraid. Would you agree? If you think that the super successful are not afraid, I'm here to tell you today that is just not true. It is more common than you might think. So here is a lady whose fear could have grounded her from ascending to the top of her profession. You recognize her? Her t-shirt kind of gives it away a little bit. There's a little clue. There's a little clue. What's her name, though? Sarah Blakely, that's right. So this is Sarah Blakely, and she started the company Spanx with just a few $1,000s. And from what I understand now, it's a billion-dollar company. So it went from a few $1,000s to a billion-dollar company. But Sarah had a big fear in the beginning, and that was a fear of flying. So she did what the average person does in America. We take classes. We go to classes to figure out how to get over our fears and learn new things. That's why some of you went to a coaching circle this morning, because some of those coaching circles covered some of the content of this presentation. You wanted to learn something new that would help you to get over a hump. And so Sarah took a class on fear of flying, but here was the problem with that. So where's the secret there? Where's the secret of superachievement in her quote? She just did it. She was afraid to fly, and so she did what the average person would do, which is to go find a class about it so we can figure it out. But then she never made the class because her schedule demanded that she fly anyway. And so she was able to overcome her fear, not from the class, but by flying anyway. And here's another quote that tells you why you should fly anyway. In this picture is Shama Hyder. Shama Hyder set up the Zen marketing agency in Texas in 2009. Now, if you recall, in 2009, was that a good environment to start a business? No, it wasn't a good environment to start a business. That's why I started mine in 2008. 2008 was not as bad as 2009. Unfortunately, you had to get through 2009 to get to 2010. So I wasn't on a much better track in terms of starting a business than Shama, but she graduated, decided to start her own marketing agency, and she glommed onto this quote from Edward Teller, which helped her to gain strength as she was working through those early years. And it says something about flying, doesn't it? It says something about flying. You should fly anyway. So Shama believes that you should fly anyway, even if you have a fear of flying. But what if there's no plane? The founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, he talks about flying as well. Because all entrepreneurs have to fly. Whether you're launching your business or flying to meetings, you have to fly. So this is what Reid had to say about flying. Isn't that interesting? So Sarah had a fear of flying, but she just flew anyway. And Shama said, well, you just go ahead and fly, because either you're going to land on solid ground or you'll learn how to fly. And what Reid says is, doesn't matter if there's even an airplane, just fly anyway. And I think the reason that he said this other quote, which is not on the screen, is if you are not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you shipped too late. You shipped it too late. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you shipped it too late. And doesn't that tell you that you should just go ahead and fly anyway, because you'll assemble a plane on the way down? So he's saying, just figure it out. She's saying, someone will come to help you. Sarah before her is saying, just go do it. So what that tells me is, being afraid, it's perfectly normal. This fear that we have about getting to a level that's much higher than we are now, and that wonderment as to whether we could actually do it or not, it's totally normal. But there are some different fears that come along to hold us up. And so you might need a formula. You might feel like, well, is there some sort of formula that we can use to overcome our fears? Some people have studied this a lot, and they do have formulas. So I've discovered one gentleman that studies fear constantly in his own life and in the lives of other superachievers. And that's Tim Ferriss. You may have heard of Tim Ferriss. He's had a very popular show on iTunes. He even had a television show for a little while. And he's written numerous books, The 4-Hour Work Week. The latest book is called Tools of Titans. So Tim has studied fear for a living. And Tim came up with a couple of ways of dealing with fear. So the first one is, take it in micro doses. Take it in micro doses. So here you see Tim, he's probably eating fugu right now. Fugu is the pufferfish that's poisonous, and if you eat it and it was prepared wrong, you'll die. If it was prepared correctly, you should feel a little tingling sensation. That's the excitement of eating fugu. You get that tingling sensation. You know that you're being microdosed just a little. You're feeling just a little of the poison. And so here's Tim probably eating fugu and feeling a little tingling. So that's one of the secrets, right? Face your fear in microdoses. So maybe you just take a plane flight every other week. Maybe you do as the founders of Warby Parker did, which was to start Warby Parker, but not quit their day jobs. They didn't quit their day jobs. They did it in microdoses where they started with Warby Parker just a little. Some people call that ooching, where they just took a small step. But Tim has another formula besides microdoses, and this formula is called fear setting. And it goes a little bit deeper than just taking microdoses. So here's the first step. What are you afraid of? Define your fear. Right? It says it right here. Define your fear. What are you really afraid of? Before you can conquer your fear, you have to know what it is you're afraid of. And for some people, that alone is a mystery. I just know I'm scared. I'm not even sure of what. So define that. Then, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you decide to take that step and you go out towards the edge and you're just about to go, what could happen if you go? How bad could it be? Write that down. Have a piece of paper with 3 columns. In the first column, write down what could happen. And then in the second column, write down what could you do to prevent that from happening. So we define the fear, what could possibly go wrong, and then what could we do to prevent that from happening. And then in the third column, we write down, what if it does happen? What could we do then? So if it did happen, what could we do if that happened? So now you have down on paper your fear, how bad could it be, what could you do to prevent it, and what could you do if it actually happens. That's the fear setting formula, and then do a second step, which is consider the benefits. If you go out to the edge and you actually do it, what good things could happen in 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years? What are the good things that could happen for us emotionally, physically, financially? So you're cutting across different parts of your life, thinking about all the good things that could happen in different time frames. 6 year, 1 year, 3 years. See how far you're going in terms of defining your fear? If you go to that extent to write these things down, chances are you'll find that the benefits outweigh the potential negatives. So consider that as a process to follow. Now let's take a look at another fear that some of you face even today, right where you are in your current positions, and that's called imposter syndrome. Raise your hand if you've felt imposter syndrome before. Look at that. Okay, look around. No, wait, hold on. Don't be afraid, right? Imposter syndrome, I don't even need to tell you that it's common because you've already seen how many hands have raised in this room. But you look at a company like Google, and you think about how difficult it is for someone to get into Google. It's a rigorous process to get a job at Google. The people that are at Google are considered to be very smart, very capable. And yet I have read from a Google employee on a Quora question thread that imposter syndrome is so common there that they have an internal distribution list dedicated to it. And that's at Google. So if the people at Google have imposter syndrome so much that they need to talk about it regularly, then it's probably pretty normal that you have it too. We all at times feel like a fraud on the way to success. And sometimes even once we're already quite successful. Let's take a look at a few people here who have imposter syndrome and have admitted it. So we have Tina Fey over here on the left. Do you know who this is? Natalie Portman, that's right. She's also suffered from it. Who's this guy? Schultz. Mr. Starbucks. Howard Schultz, that's right. Howard Schultz. He's pretty darn successful. He's pretty darn successful, and yet he has also felt imposter syndrome. I've also read that Maya Angelou suffered from imposter syndrome, and even Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster worried that they would figure out that she didn't deserve the Oscar and they would come back and take it. Imagine that. After all the years of acting, you reach the pinnacle of your profession, and even after that, you doubt yourself. And maybe for actors, feeling like an imposter's not that different. So here's something that if I felt it, I couldn't even be here with you today, or could I? When you're a super achiever, you have to get out in front of others. You have to be willing to stand up and have a whole room of people looking at you. If you're not willing to do that, it makes life pretty difficult at the top. You can't hide from speaking engagements. It just becomes a part of your profession. And I have met executives who will do anything they can to avoid being here. And yet they get to a point where they can't avoid it anymore and they have to face it. And there are a lot of people who face it and don't seem like they would be so afraid. Here are a couple examples. Barbra Streisand, she's famous for having stage fright. She's very famous, but did you know that Andrea Bocelli suffers from stage fright? And my question to you is, if Andrea can't even see the stage, why is he scared of it? I wondered about that. He can't even see you looking at him, and yet he's afraid to be out in front. That tells me that it's in the mind. right? Remember what I told you at the beginning? It's all in the mind. We have to be able to win the game that is in our mind, trying to outdo us. Because on the road to superachievement, your mind could potentially cause you to stumble and trip up because it says things like, you can't do this, you're not good enough. What makes you think you can do this? Our mind can be our own worst enemy. This is Carly Simon here on the right. Carly Simon has suffered from stage fright so bad sometimes that she's fainted. She did one performance where she saw a folk singer named Odetta who was famous in the audience, and she respected her highly. As soon as she saw her, she fainted. So for her, it became pretty serious and pretty significant, but it didn't stop her from going on to have a really significant career. So Carly Simon has done really well. So if you're starting to understand that these fears are common, let's take a look at how much they're grounded in reality. And we have to go back to 1500 to find out the truth about our fears. So I couldn't find a real picture of this gentleman because he's back in the 1500s, but his name is Michel de Montaigne. And look what he figured out way back then. Have you ever heard this? Maybe not this quote, but this reality? Hundreds of years ago, it was discovered by Michel de Montaigne that much of what we worry about is all imagined. Mark Twain said something very similar. I found a quote from Mark Twain that was similar to this. He discovered it too. You might be wondering, he's got to be famous for more than just this quote. Otherwise, a quote wouldn't be attributed to him. And it's true that even today, Montaigne has an influence on our society because he was the creator of the popular written form called the essay. The essay originated with Montaigne. And he had a personal style of writing which made him very approachable, which seemed odd at that time, but if you read his work today, it's very approachable and almost seems current because of his personalized style of writing. So he was quite popular back in the day. And so he figured this out. So the key is to win the mental game because that's where superachievement starts. It starts there. Dale Carnegie also figured this out back in the 1940s. He wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living in 1948, I believe. And at that time, he said that most of what we worry about never comes to be. But some people in our current age have studied it. So in Huffington Post, they did a study about the likelihood of what we worry about actually happening. And what they found is that of the study participants, 85% of what they worried about never happened. And of the 15% where what we worried about actually did happen, 79% of those people who were affected said that it wasn't as bad as what they thought it would be, or that they learned something from it. That they could either handle it or they learned something good from it. So what that tells us is our fears are normal, but we should go forward anyway. Because many people could be much more successful than they are if they simply kept going and facing what it is that they're afraid of. And one way to do that is to change the way we look at things. So you'll see here another secret from superachievers, which is to reframe the way we look at things. Billie Jean King was a very famous tennis player. And here's what she said. Average people look at stress and don't like it. They don't like immense pressure. They crack under intense pressure. As a superachiever, you reframe it. You come to expect it and you appreciate it. Because as Billie Jean said, pressure is a privilege that comes with superachievement. I'm fortunate to have pressure. People that aren't achieving at high levels, that's not pressure. When you're at the top of your game and you have to perform in front of a large audience, as either the Golden State Warriors or Cleveland Cavaliers will have to do tonight, that's pressure, and that's a privilege. So I think Billie Jean said it right. This next person believes that something else that we should be that helps us to achieve at a high level is grateful. And she's famous for being grateful. And that's one of her secrets to success, is being grateful regularly. And people say to Oprah, well, of course you're grateful. You have so much. Why wouldn't you be grateful? I'd be grateful if I had everything that you have, Oprah. But she says, no. No, you have that wrong. I was grateful before I was this successful. Oprah was not handed a silver spoon. She didn't grow up in wealth. But she was already grateful back then for what she had. You know, we went back to the 1500s, but we could go back 2,000 years to the Bible. And the Bible says that we have to be grateful in all circumstances. In all circumstances. So Oprah learned to be grateful in all circumstances when she didn't have much. It's easy for us to be grateful when we have a lot going for us, a lot of good things in our lives. But can we be grateful when things aren't going well, when things are difficult? That's the test of reframing your perspective. So I want to give you a little exercise now about reframing your perspective. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a series of situations that often make us mad and frustrate us. And let's reframe it. So I'm going to show you the situation. I'm going to tell you what frustrates you, and then you turn to your neighbor and spend a moment reframing it, looking for the good thing. I should be grateful because, and then you tell your neighbor why you should be grateful. Okay, so here's the first one. We hate traffic. We hate traffic. If you live in a major metropolitan area, not even just San Francisco, but LA, Atlanta, Dallas-Fort Worth, Washington, D.C., Boston, you know what gridlock feels like. And you know that it doesn't feel very good and that you often get frustrated. So here's the first one, and this is an easy one, really, right? I mean, we get angry all the time, but there's really an easy one. So turn to your neighbor and say, instead of being frustrated, I should be grateful because. Now that was an easy one. So we got you warmed up with an easy one. Here's your next one. Rejection. I gave a proposal to my manager for something new that we could do in our group, and they shot it down. My manager shot it down. Or I'm in sales, and I presented a great proposal. I knew this would kill for the client, but they rejected it. So you've been rejected. Or I pitched a new idea to my spouse about something that we could do, and they rejected it and weren't very supportive. So one way or another, we get rejected in our lives. How can we reframe rejection and be grateful despite how we might feel at first? How we might feel at first, okay? So now turn to your neighbor. How could you feel grateful through a rejection? All right, time for your next one. So now you're starting to exercise that muscle, right? Because this is really a superpower. I'm telling you, if you can figure out how to reframe the bad news that comes to you and propel yourself out of that, you are really onto something in terms of winning the mental game of superachievement. So here's your next one. Being passed over. Ooh, oh my gosh. I know this has happened to people here at this conference. Maybe not in this room, but there's somebody here at this conference that has experienced this, where you've worked for years to be just the right person for that opportunity. And right out from under you, whoops, went to somebody else. And that somebody else, you thought you're better than them too. Yeah, it was like, Right? And that's what really makes it difficult. Yeah, if you feel that they're better qualified than you, then, well, I guess the better person got the job. But when you feel that you're more qualified than them, man, that hurts. Okay, so how are you going to reframe that? Okay, How are you going to reframe that? Okay, work with your neighbor on that one. So the next one I'm going to do for you, not meaning that it happened to me. It could have happened to me, but imagine that you're the owner of a company and you come to your company and find this. Oh, that is bad. So we have to go back to 1914. We have to go back to 1914 for this one. Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison had a laboratory complex by this time, and he was standing in front of the whole complex going up in flames. And here's what he did. Thomas turned to his son and he said, go get your mother and tell her to call her friends and come over because they'll probably never see a fire like this again in their lives. That's amazing. And I also heard that he said, well, this is good because all our mistakes have been burned up. Now we can start fresh. The fire cost over $20 million in damage in today's dollars. He had to go to his good friend Henry Ford to get a loan to rebuild. And within 3 weeks, they were already at it again. And in the next year, they had $10 million in revenue. I believe by today's dollars. I'm not sure on that, but I believe it was by today's dollars. So that's how Thomas Edison was able to deal with something like this by reframing his perspective and also making light of it. He joked about it. His son couldn't believe what he was hearing his dad say. Like, Dad, are you serious? Like, we're losing everything. The insurance companies only gave back 1/3 of the worth. That's why he had to go to Henry Ford to borrow money to start again. But if you look closely at this picture, you see something there? That's not Photoshop, at least not from me. Maybe it is, but I think it was there for a reason. That there's always a silver lining, but you got to look for it. If you don't look for it, you might not see it at first. So that's what's really important. So we've talked about reframing, we talked about Tim's fear-setting formula, but I want to give you a couple other exercises that you can do to get over your fears from Psychology Today. Psychology Today obviously has studied fear and what holds people back, and has considered different ways to deal with it. So let's take a look at one of their ways of getting over fear. And the first one is mindfulness. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of in vogue today. You may have seen that it's all over the place. I've heard that Google actually has classes on mindfulness for their employees. And talk about a place that needs it, right? I'm sure those people are stressed out working there, that the work never ends. But mindfulness is starting to become a discipline that is going beyond monks and Buddhism and rural places like monasteries, but coming right into workplaces and homes in metropolitan areas. So mindfulness is a proven method to relax and calm down and release your stress. One way of doing that is through meditation. And there are many very popular apps now for meditation. One that I've started to use is called Headspace. Headspace is a very popular app for meditation. It guides you through short little stints of meditation, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a little longer if you're starting to get good at it. But you can take it in small microdoses. Microdoses of fear, also microdoses of the good things that you should do. Because trying to meditate for an hour right from the beginning, probably really difficult. But trying to meditate for 10 minutes just to kind of get it, probably a little bit easier. So consider mindfulness as one way of doing it, and meditation. Right? A simple meditation is just to close your eyes, focus on the sounds that you hear around you, the smells, feel the weight of your body on the chair, your feet on the floor. Scan your body from head to toe. Feel your body. Feel what you're thinking about. Focus on your breath. Now, this is just a meditation exercise you can do anytime, anywhere. It's quite simple, right? That's That's one exercise. And these people swear by meditation. Ariana Huffington used to work like crazy. She worked so hard that she passed out at the office, hit her head on the edge of the desk, and caused herself significant injury. That's how burned out she was at the office. She almost killed herself through overwork. Now she goes around the country telling people they need more balance in their lives and get some rest. So she swears by meditation. This one surprised me a little bit. Bill Ford, executive chairman of Ford. He swears by meditation. Do you recognize this lady? Witty Hall of Fame inductee from 2007. Her name is Padma Shri Warrior, former chief technical officer of Cisco Systems, now involved in other things. But she swears by meditation as well. And Padma Shri says that she also does a digital detox every Saturday. No digital all day Saturday. Notice how they call it digital detox? That tells you something, right? Yeah. Here's the second exercise from Psychology Today. Act as if. Act as if. And what that's referring to is body language, the importance of body language. This is Usain Bolt, who is a hyperachiever. I mean, he has won gold medals in the last 3 Summer Olympics. That's rare. That is rare, from the little country of Jamaica. And Usain absolutely knows about the power of body language. He has all kinds of moves that get him framed just right and feeling like an achiever. So act as if you're an achiever. Be bold with your body language. So here are a couple other people that swear by it. Tony Robbins was preaching changing your state many years ago. Change your physiology to change the way you think. So act as if. This lady came a little later than Tony Robbins to the game, but definitely has come on strong. According to her own PR, she has the second most popular TED Talk of all. Amy Cuddy. Amy Cuddy. And she wrote a book on presence, and in that book she talks about the power of body language. And she teaches an exercise called the Superwoman pose. You seen this? Okay, so stand up. Stand up. You've been sitting for a while. I know you've been talking, but you've been sitting. So everybody stand up and put your hands on your hips, just like you see in the picture. Put your shoulders back. Put your head up like that. Imagine that you have a cape flowing behind you. Or imagine that you're Gal Gadot, right? Who's Gal Gadot? Wonder Woman, that's right. I saw that on Saturday. Man, that movie was impressive. Or I mean, Woman, that movie was impressive. That was a really great movie. I didn't think I could hang for 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I had no problem, actually. It was really good. So this is the Superwoman pose. So what Amy says is, if you're going into a big meeting and you're feeling a little bit of pressure, maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, which Amy felt. She felt imposter syndrome. She was in a bad car accident, had brain damage, lost 30 IQ points. And people told her, maybe you shouldn't continue on in school. You're just not smart enough. She didn't believe it and went on to get a PhD from Princeton, and now is totally on the scene as a super achiever. She says, do this for 2 minutes and you will feel like a super achiever. You will feel bold and strong before you go into that important meeting. So next time you need it, try it for 2 minutes, okay? All right, thank you. So let's review these concepts. Let's review the concepts that we've talked about in the first part of the presentation, winning the mental game. And it's all up here, right? We talked about the fact that fear is normal. Be afraid. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. It's totally normal. You saw many, many people who have been very successful who have felt afraid. And thinking you're a fraud, also normal. Also normal. But you have to face those fears. Feeling afraid is normal, but you have to face them and do something about them. So I shared with you some exercise that you can do, Tim's formulas, and use what Oprah espouses, being grateful. Write down what you're grateful for. Get into the habit of gratitude. As they say, the attitude of gratitude. Get into that habit. and apply mindfulness. If you're not using mindfulness as a tool today, consider starting. It's a great tool, and it really helps you relax. I fall asleep really easily at night because I practice meditation, and I just release all the thoughts of the day and just fall asleep really easily. Sometimes during meditation, which I don't think is the way it's supposed to happen. But I figure I'm on the right track and act as if. Yeah, I should probably do it earlier during the day than at the end of the day. Yeah, all right, and act as if. All right, so that's winning the mental game. Let's go to section 2. Section 2 is not about what we think, it's about how we see things. It's about how we see things, and specifically, how we see time. How we see time. Because superachievers have a way of getting so much done, and yet they're not granted any more time than we are. How is it? How is it that they're able to get so much done in less time? It's the way they see it. So here's idea number 1 in seeing time differently. Operating meetings differently. This is a picture from a software company called Pivotal. Pivotal is not a public company, still a private company, currently valued at $2.8 billion. Billion. So these guys are players. They're backed by money from Ford and several other companies. They have companies like Home Depot coming into Pivotal to find out what they're doing right because they seem to be onto something. So Pivotal starts the day supposedly at 9:06. At 9:06, there's breakfast and there's a huddle. It's a company-wide huddle, and they spend 5 to 10 minutes making some important announcements, and then they have this green box. You can see in this picture, it's this green padded box. It's like a felt box, and inside is a microphone. And they just throw it to the person that needs to speak. So they go around different departments, want to say something to the whole company. Not all departments, or it would take longer than 10 minutes. So just a few departments each day, just a 10-minute meeting, and they're done with a big clap, and they separate. Then the subgroups may go and have their own little meetings, but they also average about 10 minutes. Sometimes a little bit longer, but what the CTO, his last name is Me, I think his first name might be Bill. He goes by this philosophy that meetings wreck productivity. Who agrees with that? All right, so Pivotal may be accepting jobs. They may be accepting applications. So he also has a different belief, which is really going to make you run for Pivotal. 40 hours is enough. 40 hours is enough. Now, isn't that interesting? That he believes that 40 hours is plenty to get your work done because you're not spending your day in meetings. If you're not spending your day in meetings, you're getting your dry cleaning done, you're getting haircuts at work, you're getting food provided to you, you can get a lot of work done. And they have this other trick where on a development team, they have one person assigned to be the interrupt. And what that means is if you're coming from an outside department and you want to talk to someone in development, you go to the interrupt for the day. The interrupt is the only person that you can interrupt. And that person will take the message and then share it with the rest of the team as necessary. So the rest of the team can stay in flow and work. Because we know that once we get in a flow and we get interrupted, it could take up to 20 minutes for us to regain our concentration. So they figured that out at Pivotal, so they let people stay in flow and work. And then when it gets to 6 o'clock, you better be getting out of work. Because he says that people that stay at work late, they get burned out, they don't do their best work, and they're generally not happy. So 40 hours is enough. Pretty interesting. It's a different perspective, isn't it? 10-minute meetings, get your work done, and go home and live your life. Here's another company from Australia. They're named Atlassian. They're an enterprise software company, and this is supposedly Atlas holding up the world. That's their logo, right? What Atlassian does, they've been playing around with different ways of looking at time. For 4 years, they tried the experiment of 20% time. 20% time is where you allow employees to spend 20% of their schedule on whatever they want. Sounds awesome, right? For 4 years, they tried it and found it didn't work. They said that on average, employees spent 1.1% of their time on their own stuff because they had a lot of other work to do and they felt guilty not doing it, and especially if it held back their colleagues. So it turned out to be kind of like a team thing. I don't know what to work on alone, and I feel like I'm letting people down, so they only used 1.1% on average. So after 4 years, they scrapped the experiment. What did work, though, are Ship It days and innovation weeks. Ship It day is where they dedicate one day and you work on whatever you want during that one day, as long as you're going to come back one day later with something that you can show for that effort. That has worked. And Innovation Week, they have these before a product release. When they're doing a major release, they have an Innovation Week where you can put forward a request to work on something that is going to be relevant. The company doesn't specify what you're going to work on, but you do have to have it approved. And once it's approved, you select your team and you work on it for a week. And then at the end of the week, you show the fruits of your labor. They've had a few of these and say that they have been wildly successful. So why don't organizations do things like Ship It days and 10-minute meetings and innovation weeks? Or jam sessions? This is Darren Hardy. Darren Hardy used to be the publisher of Success Magazine, and he is something like a modern-day Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, and he's famous for having been given money by Andrew Carnegie to talk to very wealthy, successful people and figure out what makes them tick. Pretty nice gig. Darren Hardy got the gig in present-day times. As the publisher of Success Magazine, he had carte blanche to interview the most successful people around the world. So anyone who's super successful, when Darren called, they said, sure, I'll talk with you for a few minutes. Why not? You're going to talk about it in Success Magazine? Sounds good. So what Darren figured out is one of the success secrets that he's applied to his own life is called a jam session. So in the morning when most people are checking email, they're doing all kinds of low quality work, Darren is going at it for 90 minutes. He's just jamming for 90 minutes, working on his number one priority. And he gets a lot of work done by doing that. So many of us think the beginning of the day is when we have to deal with other people's agendas, which is email in our inbox. Not Darren. He makes people wait 90 minutes because he knows what he would like to work on instead. How about this one? You may not have heard of this. This is called 4DX. It's based on a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. The 4 Disciplines of Execution is a sub-practice of Covey. What is it, Franklin Covey? I think it's called Franklin Covey, right? Franklin Covey, 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's a subgroup within that company, and what they teach is a process to get out from the whirlwind. The whirlwind is what you face every day when you go to work, and you have so much work to do. That's the whirlwind, and you're caught in it every day. And you don't know, how am I going to get my wildly important goals done? They call them WIGs. The 4DX process is identify your WIGs, create lead measures, which are activities that can influence an outcome that you're in control of, create a scoreboard so you can track your progress, and then have a cadence of accountability, which is you meet every single week for a WIG meeting. And all you do for about 20 minutes is spend time going around the room talking about how you've affected progress towards the WIG. Companies like the New York Marriott Hotel, the flagship Marriott in New York City, by following the 4DX system, they got out of their whirlwind and they had their best year ever. Highest customer satisfaction scores, highest employee satisfaction scores, highest revenue, highest profitability in a single go with 4DX. Department of Human Services in Atlanta, Georgia, applied 4DX across over 150 counties. And they reduced repeat incidents of child maltreatment by 60% following the 4DX system. organizations can get out from the whirlwind. They can see time differently, and they can get wildly important goals done, but they need a process, and that's 4DX. We talked about Tim Ferriss earlier. Well, he also has a process for getting better faster. And he says, go to someone who is a world-class expert and say to that person, look, I know it probably took you 10,000 hours to get to the level that you're at, but I only have 6 months. What should I do? I only have 90 days. What do you recommend that I do to get as good as I can in that short amount of time? And he says when you do that, the expert will give you the hacks and the shortcuts that they don't normally talk about. Interesting process. This is her secret. Sonia Sotomayor, who is the first Latin American to get on the Supreme Court. Not even just woman, first Latin American to get on the Supreme Court. On the way up, when she couldn't do something, she went to an expert and asked them, what should I do? How did you do this? And she got better faster by asking people for help. On the way to superachievement, we have to ask for help. It's hard to do it on your own. Here's another way of looking at time differently. This is from Jeffrey Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn. So Jeff has blank spaces on his calendar, up to an hour and a half on his calendar. He says daily. He has blank spaces on his calendar daily where he just thinks. He just thinks. He doesn't meet with anybody. And that's interesting because he has countless people asking him for his time every day. And he could be in meeting after meeting after meeting, but he has blank space where he can just think, because he says that this is his most important productivity tool, to have time to think built into his calendar regularly. We talked about Sarah Blakely earlier. Sarah Blakely intentionally takes the long way to work and the long way home just so she can have alone time in her car and think. She says traffic isn't the best place to think, but it's a place I've been able to carve out. If anyone here recognizes her, I'll be impressed. Laura Nelson, and she and her brother started a company called ColourPop. It's a cosmetics company, and they started it back in 2014, and you can't find ColourPop in stores. It is only available online. They wanted to be the first Instagram cosmetics company. They have over 4 million followers on Instagram, more than Estee Lauder and Revlon combined, because they are super in touch with their customers and they iterate quickly. They don't take years to create a product, they take months. They iterate within weeks. They release products fast based on customer feedback. And so they're the new type of real-time corporation. And they're no small operation, they have 1,000 employees. So ColourPop is not just a little startup out of an apartment. I mean, this is a real company selling tons of cosmetics, iterating in real time. You've heard about it in fashion, it's also happening in cosmetics. So these are different people who look at time differently. Let's review these concepts. Consider applying some of these concepts in your life or in your organization to get onto a higher level of achievement, maybe even super achievement. Meet in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Decide that 40 hours is enough. Follow Atlassian's example and have ship-it days and innovation weeks. Have a jam session a few days a week. Use Tim's formula or Sonia's formula, ask for help of experts. Use Jeffrey's formula of loving blank spaces, and be a real-time organization. Produce and iterate much faster than your competition. In order to achieve at a high level, you have to shift the way you think, and you have to shift the way you look at things. But if you can do that, then you will be on the road to super achievement. And as Zig Ziglar said, I'll see you at the top. Thank you.